This is Beyond the Green Screen, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm meteorologist Royal Norman. This is Beyond the Green Screen from the First Alert Weather Forecasters, our podcast for you. And today in our podcast, we're going to learn about severe weather and how severe weather warnings are distributed around Metro Phoenix and central Arizona, even into Southern California. Tom Frieders is our guest today. He is the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service. Tom, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We've known each other for a bunch of years, and you have a very, very difficult job. We're going to talk about that, but first we're going to talk about weather because that's my favorite subject. When did you start getting into weather?
I mean, I can always remember as far back as I can tell. I was always interested in weather. I mean, even my parents say I was running to the window every time there was a storm coming through. So it was my ultimate goal to become a meteorologist, and it's been a great career.
Yeah. So, like, when you were, where did you grow up? What area?
I grew up outside of a west suburb of Chicago.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you saw some pretty decent summer thunderstorms and stuff.
We had it all back there in Illinois. So from winter weather to big storms. Yeah.
And so from early on, you were like looking at the sky and just enjoying the storms and just saying, wow, this is cool.
Yeah, always. And then, involved in, we still do spotter training here locally, but we always did that nationwide. And even back growing up, I went to those training sessions and just learning everything I could about weather.
Wait a minute. So you were a spotter, too, at that age?
Exactly.
Wow,
exactly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So did you know through high school? Because I did not know through high school what I wanted to do. But did you have an idea even in high school?
I did. Okay. I had my eyes as getting a meteorology degree all the way in through high school, yeah. So probably one of those rare people that knew what they wanted to do all the way through their high school time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, though. And you went to Northern Illinois University, the Huskies.
Yeah, being outside of Chicago, that's where I graduated.
Yeah, and so did you get a job right out of school?
Pretty much, just a few months delay. But yeah, about 6 months or so after graduating, got into the National Weather Service and been there over 30 years now.
Okay, so where was that first stop? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, so being from Chicago,
right.
I got that first call for Casper, Wyoming.
That's different.
That was my first office, and that office is long closed by then. It kind of dates myself, but the National Weather Service went through a modernization back in the early 90s, so a lot of those smaller offices have closed down, but that's where I started out.
And what year was that about?
That was back about 92.
So the technology then, as I recall, and from the outside looking in, because I used to work, I worked with you guys for all those years, that was about the time that technology was beginning to make a change, wasn't it?
It was. There was a thing called email that just started coming out.
Yeah,
so,
crazy.
Talking about dating myself.
Yeah.
Email and the internet, and, well, okay, I guess I can sign up for email. I don't know what I'll use it for. But.
Right. And now we use it nonstop. So what was it like in a little town, Casper, doing forecasts for the first time for the National Weather Service?
Yeah, it was real interesting, and we were just kind of a smaller office linked to Cheyenne, Wyoming was the main state office. We had state offices back then.
Yeah.
So we were kind of a smaller office, just providing local forecasts for Casper and some of the small communities of northeast Wyoming. It was just a real small area as compared to the way we cover things now.
And how did it make you feel? Pretty cool?
Cool? Yeah, it was great. Again, that was what I wanted to do, and we do recordings on the weather radios, and we actually had to go outside and do weather observations for the airport there every hour. So that's all automated these days.
Oh yeah, we used to have the Stevenson screens and everything. You have to go out and read them.
Yeah,
that was a crazy time. Yeah. So. A little bit similar to broadcasting, National Weather Service meteorologist is you do have to move around a little bit. Tell us your stops. Where have you been?
Yeah, so Casper, Wyoming, my first stop, and that was only about 3 years I was there. And then that was called an intern back then. And then I moved over back to Illinois. There's an office that was during the modernization, so a new office in central Illinois opened up. That's where I spent about 10 years. And then from there, my family, we thought we liked the West.
Yeah.
So we came back out, and I ended up back in Wyoming, in Riverton, Wyoming, for several years. And then moved up to Billings, Montana.
Oh, wow.
And here I am here in Phoenix now just in the last few years.
Yeah, it's an amazing sort of progression. So you moved down to Arizona. Arizona presents different weather issues than Montana and Wyoming. Yes,
it is. It's there was challenges up there because you have the mountains similar to down here. But I tell you what, the monsoon season is a chaotic beast. Really to forecast for and to warn for. And so it offers up all kinds of different challenges and even messaging heat and stuff, trying to get everybody to take heat seriously can be a challenge. So, whole new set of challenges.
So it seems to me that would be one of the stressful parts about working for the National Weather Service, you and all the other meteorologists there, is that your charge is, in a sense, to warn us when there's bad weather. That's a huge responsibility.
Yeah, it's all about protection of life and property. That's what we're here for. And so, we use every tool in the box to try to get everything, as right as possible.
Yeah.
And everybody knows we're not right all the time.
Right.
And so there are certainly challenges.
Now, when you guys are looking at warning or watch situations across the state, I know the answer to this, but you do coordinate with Flagstaff and with Tucson. You guys are all talking and saying, hey, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? Before, you start issuing a set of advisories or watches. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, Phoenix office, we cover a subsector of Arizona, but we have 4 offices in the Weather Service that cover Arizona, Flagstaff, Tucson, and even Vegas.
Yeah.
And so, we're coordinating with everybody, making sure we have a consistent message out there.
It's kind of weird to me. A lot of folks probably don't know this, but you guys also forecast for Southern California, El Centro area as well. Did that get added in because it's desert and it's similar weather, or why was that added into your mix?
Yeah, there's always a lot of reasoning behind that, but a lot of it was the climatologically similar conditions as you get into southwest Arizona, extending into southeast California. So that was an addition to our area besides the Arizona counties that we cover. So, it's kind of a little bit different than if San Diego was to take it, where they're dealing with a lot more marine stuff and near-shore type activities.
So when you're issuing warnings, it seems to me, and there's maybe more, but there's 2 different kinds. There's kinds when somebody actually that you trust sees something, is reporting it, say maybe dense fog, or sees a tornado or a big dust storm, or the kind you observe on radar beforehand. Any percentage? Are they 50-50? Are most of your warnings, come from your equipment, or do they come from the public?
I think a majority, I don't have those exact numbers, but I think the majority of them you're talking about, since we're trying to get ahead of things before they're actually observed, you're going to have a good percentage of those that are kind of radar based, where we're seeing something on radar that looks like it's severe, and so we're trying to get that message out ahead of that. Could be severe winds, hail, and or flooding and things like that. So a majority of them are going to come out based on radar indications. But we do have that spotter network out there with volunteers that report things to us, and there will be times when we get a report and we have to issue a warning right after that.
So are there pretty precise categories or levels that you see, for instance, on radar before you might issue any kind of a severe thunderstorm warning or something like that? Are there precise numbers that you see?
Well, I think a lot of people see, like on your newscast, you're showing the radar, you're showing these different colors on the radar.
Right.
Well, that's closer to the surface of what the storm is doing. As meteorologists, we're also looking at depth of the storm high up in the atmosphere. And if those brighter, just to keep it simple, those brighter colors get up 40, 50,000 feet up in the atmosphere, that's tapping, some really strong atmospheric conditions that can produce severe weather. And then we're talking about 60-plus mile-an-hour winds or hail 1 inch in diameter or larger, things like that. But we have certain criteria that we look at for the radar to issue our warnings.
So pretty much everybody, like every meteorologist who'd be on duty, would know the criteria and when it's time to issue the warnings and things like that, correct? It's kind of the same deal for everybody.
Yeah, so our meteorologists are multitaskers.
No, I know.
So we have to do everything from monitoring the radar to doing social media to issuing the warnings, and then even just our regular products, and we do aviation support too for like the airport. So we're trained in all those aspects. Now, obviously, during one storm, we got individuals focusing in certain areas. But yeah, we're trained on everything.
So explain the radar thing, because I've tried to explain this before to folks and I don't get it right. First of all, on your phone, most people are seeing, when they look at the radar, they're seeing this composite radar that could be as old as 15 minutes before it's gotten all composited up and rounded and smooth and everything like that. Contrast that with the radar you're seeing, which is never older than 5 minutes, because that's how long it takes to make a scan?
Well, what we're doing with the Doppler radar network that we utilize, it takes different scans of the atmosphere. So it starts out it starts out about half degree up off the ground. It goes around 360 degrees, samples the atmosphere. Then it raises a little bit, does it again, raises a little bit, does it again. And so there you get and then when it gets all these different levels done, and it could be 5-6 minutes later, that's where you composite everything together. And the composite radar that some people might see is adding up all those different levels into one product. And so, yeah, you're going to have that 5 or 6 minute delay. Yeah. But even any level, you're always going to have that delay. So it's not always instantaneous of what we're looking at. There's always going to be some delay there based on having to do all those different scans.
Yeah, I mean, like I've got a weather app that just looks at can do your reflective and your velocities and stuff. And even that has a delay in it, although maybe not as much as a composite radar that some other company was putting together. Because that's the other thing. You never know how long it's taking them to crunch the numbers before they put out their product, too.
Yeah, it just depends on what app you're using. There could be some additional delay there because we put out kind of the raw data, and then there's a lot of private folks that can take that data and manipulate it and create nice fancy graphics that may take a little bit more time.
So it takes 5 minutes to do the whole routine with the radar, but correct me if I'm wrong, can you stop that and actually sample a storm and just play around with a storm if you have something big to look at?
That was the old days.
Oh, that was the old days. Well, there you go. That dates me.
That was the older days where we would stop the radar and, we really want to look at that storm, and we'd scan it and get a continuous scan. But with the new Doppler radar, it does, like I was saying, it's constantly spinning, and it takes those different levels, and then you either look at different levels or you take a composite of different things like the reflectivity, which is the intensity of the rain.
Yeah. We've talked about this before. One of the things that's really difficult to see on radar because of a whole bunch of reasons are microbursts. Tell us about microbursts and how quickly they can form and why they sometimes, at least initially, escape radar sightings.
Well, the term micro is small.
There you go.
So you're talking typically, a couple miles, maybe impacting a couple mile radius area. And so and a lot of times that's a downrush of air that's coming out of a thunderstorm, and so it's slamming into the ground and produces that damage in that small micro area. Right. Well, on our radar too, as it goes out, so say for instance Phoenix, we have the radar at Gateway Airport, and as it goes out further out away from the radar, it
goes higher and higher.
It's higher and higher. Yeah. And so we could be sampling the storm at 4,000 or 5,000 feet, and underneath that we get a report of a microburst and wind damage. And sometimes it doesn't catch that. We can catch them, at times, but there are some that are really isolated that are really difficult to track down ahead of time.
Yeah, you were saying, I think you told me once that it's easier to try to find the kind of thunderstorm that might produce a microburst than it is to try to find a storm that actually is producing a microburst. Do you look for certain signs?
Yeah, so you're looking at those different levels again, looking at things, and sometimes, again, different levels, we see that precip start to kind of collapse too, and that means it's bringing down air. That may be a precursor of microburst winds, and there are a lot of other things we look at. But so once it happens, and microbursts usually don't last very long, right. And so a lot of times by the time it happens, a warning's not going to do any good because it's done. And so, that's where the challenge is.
Yeah, and I just recently talked to a group, and one of the questions was about microbursts and tornadoes, and the person said, they've got tornado warnings at 30 and 45 minutes, and I tried to explain that they're different beasts. They really are different beasts. Tornadoes have lots of different signs and larger signs that radar can detect, whereas microbursts do not. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. And, tornadoes, you will have stronger circulation that we can pick up on radar further up into the storm, that we're not missing it below it. So and tornadoes are produced out of the most severe storms, and so they can be could be a little easier to project than microbursts, especially if you're talking about a place like Oklahoma or something.
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk about the monsoon in a second, but we're in winter season, and so winter season for the National Weather Service in Phoenix. What are the main warning things you're looking for? Potential for flooding, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it just depends, on any given event. Winter can produce anything from we're in Arizona, but we still have those higher elevations that are producing heavy snow. So anything from heavy snow, some of the storms are really moisture laden, and so flooding could be an issue. And then also, you have a lot of times strong winds with some of these, and they're not the strong winds we were just talking about with microbursts.
Right.
They're more widespread that just, a front comes through and we get some. We had that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, pretty sustained
we had 40
winds.
to 50 mile an hour winds for 3-4 hours.
Yeah.
So, there's plenty of things that are challenging for the winter as well.
So, and I forgot, you cover the mountains of Gila County, don't you, from the Phoenix office? So you would have some winter storm warnings.
We actually do.
Yeah.
We actually do have some winter
impacts. So you do the deserts and the mountains. Yeah. That's pretty crazy. So when you guys and gals put out a warning and it goes to my cell phone like almost instantly, how does it? Do you even know how that works, or do you know that it just works?
I'm not an IT expert, that's for sure. Yeah. But overall, I don't know the exact path and how that all works. But thinking about it ahead of time, having that application that you want on your phone that's going to alert you. There's a lot of apps out there. Having those available is always good to make sure you know how you're going to get your warnings ahead of time, especially before we get to monsoon season. So to get that, there's another wireless emergency alerts that come out now too. Have you heard those? Strange vibration, the vibration noise that you get on your cell phones these days for like flash flood warnings and things like that. Yeah. Dust storm warnings is another one. That's a new addition to the alert. So, and they're only reserved for the most intense type weather. So it is those severe dust storms. It's flash flooding that can be fatal, and tornadoes, and then only for severe thunderstorms that could produce 80-plus mile-an-hour winds or baseball-size hail, which we don't usually get down here, but it's reserved for those most intense storms. So as long as you don't it's a government alert on your iPhone. If you don't turn that off, you'll automatically are signed up for that, and you'll get that strange noise and vibration on your phone.
Which is probably good in that case to get that notification.
Yeah, that's for sure. For the strongest.
And I think that most people, it used to be back in the day, I think most people got their initial warnings from radio and TV. I'll bet most of them get them off their phones right now, are getting alerts off their phones. I think that's a good thing, too, because everyone's got a phone in their pocket,
Yeah, it's handy. Yeah, it's right there. And so no matter where you're at, then you don't have to be at home, watching the emergency alert come across the TV. You're going to get that alert when you're driving or when you're at work and things like that.
Yeah, and like the app that I have it set so that it does Phoenix, just so I know what's happening. Duh. But I also have it set for where I am. So if wherever I am around the country, if there were any kind of a weather alert, I would get that. And I think that's the really cool thing about the alerts these days is that you really can fine tune them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wherever you are.
Some of the apps too have, you can add multiple places. So even if you're not traveling and you live in Phoenix, but you have family in Chicago, you can set that point on your app too, so that you're aware of what's going on back there.
Yeah. Take me through the process of issuing a warning. There's maybe 2 or 3 people on duty at the time, something like that. Maybe more, maybe less, but something like that. When you start seeing storms, is there almost immediate discussion? Hey, we got to watch this one. Let's take a look at this. What's the process?
Yeah, there's continuous conversation. So in our office, we always have 2 meteorologists on 24/7. So if anything pops up, you always have somebody watching things out. And then once we get into these big events, when you're hearing a lot of warnings come across the TV, We're hopping pretty good,
Yeah.
and then we're probably at 4 or 5 people in the office, meteorologists, and so we're constantly talking. A lot of times what we do is segment things out, and okay, you watch the storm over there in Maricopa and Pinal counties, and you watch the storms in Southeast California, and so you kind of divide that up so people can focus on certain things.
Yeah, and that's good. And then when the decision comes to do a warning, is it like everybody thumbs up, or if I were a meteorologist of the Weather Service, do I have the authority to go, boom, it's a warning?
Yeah, all the meteorologists have that authority. So typically it's like I was just saying, they're segmented. So if I'm doing the Phoenix area, if I see something that indicates severe thunderstorm, I will just go ahead and issue that. Or I can confer with other meteorologists, which we do periodically. But everybody does have that authority. And it could be, there's multiple things that go into that. It could be radar indicated, or it could be a volunteer. We have volunteer spotters that could call in a report of, hey, I just had wind damage at my house, and we can see the radar still showing persistent winds. We can get that warning out based on a report as well.
Yeah. The monsoon. What fun, right? I mean, it wasn't last year. let's say that.
If you
right?
like monsoon.
Yeah, if you like monsoon and rain, and you didn't get it last year. But monsoon's very interesting, very hard to predict, very hard to warn on sometimes. You can warn on a storm and it goes poof. Challenges in the monsoon are pretty big for you guys, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. It can be a pretty chaotic storm systems that develop, and typically every afternoon when you get in that active pattern. So, and if you're used to things out east and that, where storms go from west to east, they sometimes can go east to west here. So you got to watch in different directions depending on the situation. But certainly a lot of challenges, because you don't typically have just a line of severe storms coming through the valley. It's these things that pop up all over the place, and as soon as they drop and dissipate, that could be when you get that severe wind out of them. And so trying to keep track of all those different storm cells out there is a challenge.
It's exciting, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean that's why we become meteorologists.
Yeah. It's exciting to watch, and it's exciting to share the knowledge, but it also is watching sort of Mother Nature do its thing, and that's what's really interesting about it. And like, last summer was kind of uninteresting about it, except for the fact that we had all that darn heat. Could you believe that heat last summer?
Yeah, it was just unrelenting, wasn't it? Yeah. And we just couldn't break it. And, monsoon thunderstorms is what's going to break the heat. Yeah. And we just didn't get that. And so the heat just continued.
Okay, so the monsoon, we have dates, June 15th through September 30th now, which is fine. And I'm going to have coming in the next couple of weeks, Tony Haffer, who was instrumental in going from the dew point definitions, like we all call the legacy definition, and you're smiling because you're like, yeah, that really stunk, and to the dates, which it was okay. It was okay by, I think, everybody in meteorology, but it was disappointing to a lot of folks because it was fun to look at the dew points every day and see if the dew points were getting high enough to declare the monsoon here and all that kind of stuff. But now that the monsoon, believe it or not, on June 15th, I checked this out, first day of the monsoon, it has never rained in Phoenix. Did you know that?
No.
It has never rained in Phoenix.
No, but it doesn't completely surprise me.
Right, yeah, me neither, yeah.
And there's a reason for the season versus, there's still applications for, monitoring the dew point. I mean, the dew point, those temperatures that, used to, kick off the monsoon season, play a role in, that's when the moisture is available to produce storms. So there's still some play in that. But the season, the way I try to convey that is, it's just like hurricane season. You know, you have this season that's when it starts and typically ends within that period, and then that's the time we just need to have people monitor things. And a lot of times they'll start earlier into Texas and New Mexico, and so we don't see that until typically maybe into July, and that's why I'm not that surprised that the 15th of June is dry.
Well, it's random because the 16th it's rained, but the 15th it's never rained. At least on the Phoenix record, there's probably a record somewhere around the valley where it's rained on the 15th, because we've actually had thunderstorms that I can recall in the first couple weeks of June, sort of a false start to the monsoon, and then it fades away and we have to wait for the regular deal. But the dates also kind of make it easier, I would think, to compare apples to apples over the years, because you just have to look at the dates. The 15th or the 30th of September, let's compare and contrast and see how we're doing rain-wise. So
yeah, that makes it easier.
It makes it a lot easier, tons easier. So if a storm, though, but a monsoon storm the monsoon could end before September 30th, because you don't get hurricanes right up into the end of hurricane season, right?
Right.
And that's all. So that's all it's about. It's like, hey, this is the time we're most likely to get thunderstorms, and sort of be aware of that.
That's exactly it. I mean, we're trying to get that awareness out ahead of time, and so we define those dates, and so then before the 15th of June, usually like the first week of June, we'll do a monsoon awareness week, and so try to get the information out to people and understand the impacts of monsoons and talk about getting those apps and things to set up that can alert you of severe weather ahead of time.
Tom Freitas with the National Weather Service is with us today. All right, Tom, cool weather story time. Does a weather story pop into your head, either a forecast or something that's just out there in your brain that you think about a lot that is, I don't know, a cool weather story?
Yeah, it may not fit from Phoenix.
No, that's okay. It doesn't have to be Phoenix.
Valley, but,
mine isn't from Phoenix either.
I spent some time up in Billings, Montana for 10 years, and one of my first years up there, we had a October 5th snowstorm that produced like 2 to 3 feet of snow just in a day or two. Oh. And that's the one I really remember, because I was actually the meteorologist forecasting up to it. But it was an interesting scenario, and it'd be interesting to look back to see what this area was impacted by. But we had a hurricane down in the Pacific that was feeding moisture up, and we had cold air come down out of Canada, and those all combined. So can you imagine tropical moisture and cold temperatures, and it just snowed like crazy, and that was one of the biggest ones that I kind of always sticks out in my mind.
That is amazing. That would be kind of fun to watch, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and my kids were just 4, 5, 6 years old, and they couldn't even walk out in the yard. It was so deep.
My goodness. I love that. All right. Tom, thank you for coming today. Your job is super important. The job that all the meteorologists do at the Weather Service is super important because, as you know, sometimes you call us media partners. Our job is to relay your message as accurately as possible when you're doing warnings. And, we feel like the folks in Arizona, Flagstaff, and you in Tucson do a really good job at keeping us informed. So thank you for that. And keep keeping us informed, and thank you for the job that you do.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for having us. And it's a great partnership to keep a consistent message out there for everybody.
And let's have a great monsoon this year, huh?
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Okay.
This is Beyond the Green Screen, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.